Hey everyone, today I'm taking a look at Gunkimono, which is a 2 to 5 player tile placement board game designed by Jeffrey Allers and published by Renegade. This one takes 45 minutes to an hour to play on average. Before I get into my review of Gunkimono, I want to give a shout out to the show sponsor, KIENDA.co.uk, who are my go-to online retailer here in the UK, and if you use my link in the show notes or the QR code, then you can get 5% off your first order. Okay, so the main board for Gunkimono is going to look like this, which is essentially split into two halves. The right-hand side of the board here is where you're going to be playing your tiles into, trying to score victory points by connecting groups of colours together. And in the left-hand side, you're going to be trying to climb these tracks to get these pagodas down and potentially score victory points when you reach the absolute pinnacle. There's going to be a number of tiles which are going to be determined depending on the player count. So the fewer the players, the fewer the tiles are going to be used in the game. And somewhere towards the bottom of the stack there is going to be an end game trigger tile. Each player is going to get given 5 of these independent little tiles here, these little single pieces, which they can choose to use throughout the game. But generally the tiles are going to look like this. And each player is going to get given 3 at random to start with. And you can see each half of these tiles, almost like a domino, has one of the colours depicted on it. So the objective of the game, of course, is to score as many victory points as you can. And essentially, you're going to get points in one of 3 different ways. So on a player's turn, you are going to choose one of your starting tiles. Let's just say I chose this one here without thinking too much about it. And I'm going to place it somewhere on this bit here. So what I'm essentially trying to do is trying to create groups of the same colour orthogonally. So let's just say I did this like so. Now the only restriction is that you cannot cover exactly over the colour beneath it. So I could not do that because this one and this one are identical, but I could do this. Now the reason I've done that is to try and create the group of oranges here. So I've got a group of 3, therefore that would give me 3 victory points. However, if you don't want to do it like that, I could choose to take these pagoda symbols and climb up the track here. So let's go back to the tile I've just placed. So my 2 options are, or I've got multiple options, are to take the 3 points or to climb up 2 up the pagoda track of that matching colour. So the orange track, that one. So I could go like this. Or I could get the 2 points here by matching these 2 kind of samurai symbols together, or potentially climb up 1 up that pagoda track. So let's just say I took the 2 pagodas here and I took 2 victory points here. And once you've placed your tile, you're going to replenish your hand back up to 3 from the supply there, and then going to, of course, fill that supply back up with another tile from the stack. Now, throughout the game, you can also choose to play these single tiles. As I explained before, you can either expand an existing region. So maybe I want to put these archers here. Now I'd have a group of 4. But alternatively, of course, as more tiles are placed, you're going to start stacking these tiles. And the way this works is that you can vertically, well, you can put them on top like this, but you can also use them as a kind of a bit of scaffolding, I suppose, by putting them face down and then placing another tile on top like so. So we've talked about why we might want to place these tiles and line them up to get victory points, because you can see here, as the game develops, you can end up getting quite a chunk of points. Like you've got all these archers lined up. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 points with a single placement, and potentially more than that if I manage to connect these up as well. So it very quickly starts building on each other and you get more and more points. But let's talk about why you might want to go up the pagoda track here. So as I said, by forsaking those victory points, you can choose to climb up these tracks here by going up this certain colour. Now, when you move all your pieces up to certain points in the game, like for example, in a 3-player game, once I get all my markers to this row, then I get to place one of my pagodas on the board. And what I'll do is I'll choose one of the spots, so it'll be silly of me not to put one here right now. Now what this means is that this region now belongs to me. And what that means in addition to that is that I cannot choose to take points by placing on that region anymore, and neither can anybody else. So by placing archers here would be completely void because you're not going to get the points, at least not instantly. However, once I place my tile, any pagoda I have is going to give me a number of points based on the surface area of that symbol. So not only would I get to place my tile, potentially get the points of a place and climb up the tracks if I wanted to, I will also get the output based on the surface area of this type. So I'd get that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 points at the end of my turn just passively. And when you start climbing and climbing, you can potentially unlock your second pagoda. And when you reach the pinnacles of these columns, then you can get these victory point tokens, which will range depending on how quick you get there. So you can see here that the first one of each type is going to be worth anywhere between 11 and 15 points on the reverse side. But if you kind of dragging your heels and don't get there very quickly, then the bottom one will get you between 1 and 5 victory points. Okay, so let's share some thoughts on Gunkimono. And for me, the standout thing about this game is how simple that turn structure is. Just play one of your tiles, either take the points or the honor points to climb the tracks, and then you're essentially done. Just replenish your hand and move on. So if if you regularly watch my content, you'll probably know that I'm a big fan of simplicity and elegance in games, and this game is pretty much elegance personified. Little to no rules bloat whatsoever. Very straightforward rules that anybody can comprehend and understand. And I do quite like that concept of, what do I want? Do I want to just keep on compounding on those existing areas and getting points now? Or am I going to forsake that to climb the track, which will probably help me in the long term a bit better? But bearing in mind that if I'm keep expanding these regions, I might not be the first person to get the pagoda there, meaning that I'll create quite a strong ticking point for somebody else to keep kind of reaping the benefits from all the effort from the other players. I also really enjoy the 3D aspect to the tile placement. It's generally a mechanism I like. A lot of my favourite tile placement games have that 3D element to it. I'm talking games like Ginkgopolis, games like Acropolis, even Miyabi. This one has that, so it adds a whole new dimension to the game, literally. So you're not just spreading out, but spreading upwards as well. And that also kind of ties into the usage of these single tiles. These are very useful tools because not only are they worth 2 pagodas, but they can very kind of precisely sneak into an area and just increase the points massively. If I wanted to sneak my archer in there, all of a sudden that will connect these archers to it and it'd be worth even more points. So you can use them a lot, but additionally you can actually use them as the balancing shield, or the point to stack the other tiles on if you want to prevent overhang, which is obviously going to be a rule breakage. So yeah, I like the use of that, and you have to use these quite savvily to get the most from them. And despite me really enjoying and praising that simple turn structure and the elegance of it, for me, that's pretty much where the positives end. So initially, I thought that this game was going to be one of those games with a simple rule set, but with a ton of hidden depth to it. And on reflection, and as I've played this more and more, I don't think that actually is the case. Because this is so transparent and abstract in its nature, there is actually an optimal play each time, and it's just going to be a matter of how long are you willing to spend at this board to find the optimal play to play the tile. Now, some people are going to enjoy that, but for me, that is not actually where the gameplay lies, and that isn't actually playing a game. It's just a matter of searching through the tiles or searching through the squares and finding what's the best place for me to play, and do that constant mental arithmetic, decide this is the most optimal place, therefore I will score the most points if I place it here. And on top of that, I thought the decisions were pretty obvious, because you're probably just going to keep on adding to the biggest region again and again until somebody places their first pagoda. The person who places their first pagoda is obviously going to put it on the biggest region. So it's quite formulaic in that path. The second person is going to place it on the second biggest region, and then as soon as that biggest region is established, everybody's going to spend all their efforts to keep attacking the runaway leader. Because if you've got a massive surface area and you're just passively getting 20 points per turn, obviously you're going to spend your turn to break up that region as much as possible by splitting it up and creating smaller and smaller surface areas. And unfortunately, because of that, I don't think the decisions are really here, and it does make the game feel quite repetitive and formulaic. The time investment and uptime are generally okay. You are looking at 45 minutes to an hour to play this one. Maybe a little bit longer than I would have liked. 30 minutes would probably be a bit more, to my favour. But it's definitely not one of those games that's going to go on, way beyond its welcome. Uptime as well is generally not too bad, providing that you're not going to be too anal about getting the exact right spot and just keeping it moving along at a nice pace. The game also scales pretty well because Depending on the player count, the pagodas are going to be put in different spaces. The bonus tiles are going to be put in different spaces as well. So that is all tailored towards, how many people you're playing with. I'm generally happy with the production of the game. All the tiles are of a good quality. They're nice and robust. I think the game is nice and bright to look at. Quite an attractive game in its entirety, really. And all the wooden pieces feel good. They're nice and chunky. And like these little markers, they're quite nicely carved and things. So I've got no issue at all with the production. And in fact, I think it's spot on for what the game is trying to do and be. Okay, so let's share some final thoughts on Gunkimono. So initially, as not to repeat myself too many times, but I definitely thought this was going to be one of those games that is going to be simple to learn but difficult to master. And that's turned out not to be the case with this game at all. Now, each time I've played it, I'm thinking to myself, am I missing something here, or are the decisions very obvious? And that's even turned out in the scoring, because I've played very relaxed at times, just shoving tiles down without thinking much, and I've ended up doing really well and winning the game. So it's like, yeah, I don't think I am missing anything, unfortunately, and I think there's a veil here that makes you think there's more going on than there actually is. That being said, there is quite a lot of upside here. I do like that multi-layer tile placement. I love the idea of establishing these regions and then getting these ticking points. That's really cool. But the problem is you're always going to follow that same routine of just the first person to get in the pagoda is going to shove their pagoda down in the biggest region, then everybody else is going to attack it. And then it's going to be a constant bash the leader game. And you're going to follow that process each time you play this one. So unfortunately, I don't think the replayability is really there. I've probably played this one 5 times or so. And each game has felt pretty much copy and paste from the last one, so there isn't really that breadth of options, and each game is going to feel, pretty much identical from the last. So needless to say, I'm not going to recommend this game. I think there's too many great tile placement games out there, even from the same designer. Jeffrey Allers is a great designer, and he's made fantastic tile placement games such as Citrus, which is one of my favourites. And for me, Gunkimono pales in comparison to a game like that. But again, if you love your pure abstracts, not pure abstracts, but close to pure abstracts, when for you it doesn't feel like work and it feels like fun in order to get that optimal placement each time, then maybe give this one a look, because it is clean and it works. But yeah, for me, the fun wasn't quite there, and the decisions were pretty much paint by numbers. And that are my final thoughts on Gunkimono.